Hey everyone, this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but I hope you stick around because I've been playing around with how to use graph data science in the context of governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC data. And this is essentially a product I've been doing some research and development on. I'm calling it Emergence. And the idea is, how do we more accurately model what an actual GRC or security program looks like? We have different requirements, we have different controls, we have policy statements, we have assets, we have other systems that can report data on the compliance of our controls, or if they're implemented, or how many systems, are they implemented across all systems, all sorts of things like that. And what you're actually looking at right now is the very beginnings of what Emergence is, and it's essentially a graph database. In this kind of demo area thing that I'm messing with, we have controls. These are common controls. These are the pink nodes, and so if we look at one of these, we can double click on it, get some more information about it. But this is essentially the control, right? And this is not necessarily from a framework, right? The idea is these are common controls. So as an organization implements a control, there will be a node for that control, regardless of if it's, put in to meet, something from the NIST framework or PCI DSS, etc., right? This is kind of your common one node rules all for kind of that control. What's interesting though is we can also add in requirements. So in this example, I just have stuff from NIST 853. This is actually R3. If we jump into this, the authority document, same revision 40, that obviously doesn't exist. So we need to edit that a little bit here. But we can then see, when we build relationships, we can see how the controls that we have map or meet the requirements that we have. In this case, we're just saying everything from NIST 853. And we can quickly see there's some one-to-one mappings, right? So that's pretty interesting. Pretty straightforward, right? This is probably a very similar control. Between this, we can look at its neighbor here. We can actually look at the relationship and see that, yep, this control satisfies this requirement. And that does not mean that the control is implemented or we've measured that it's effectively in place or it's in place across the correct scope. But essentially, this is the control that meets the requirement we have, which is AC-6 2 from NIST 853. You'll also notice we also see some of these requirements that don't have a corresponding control. And I've only taken a subset of the graph, so that could be part of it, as I just didn't pull the correct control node that maps to that. I just kind of pulled a sample of data to visualize here. But that does tell us also something interesting, right? Is we might have this requirement. We don't currently have a control that meets that. So all of these we should probably address. Now, the other thing that could be causing some of this is this might be a sub-control, and we technically meet the overall control. So that'll be kind of on the roadmap is address some of that. So that could be some of these nodes, but other ones might be we just don't have a control that maps to it. But what gets really interesting is you might have noticed this structure, right? This is a pretty interesting structure here. So if we zoom in, we can see that some of these controls are satisfying multiple requirements. So this node here, which is input data validation, is actually pretty important, right? All of them are important, but being able to understand that this node is satisfying across multiple requirements is actually pretty interesting. We can also see that this requirement has a lot of controls involved in it. It's got, 4 controls coming in that satisfy that. Same here with EC5, AC3 as well. But we can get some pretty interesting structures here. We can also do interesting stuff. So if I go back to the relationships here on this one will look a lot more interesting, right? Because we have a lot more controls that are satisfying that requirement. Now, all of these structures and this visualization is very simple. We're not using any, graph algorithms, and we also only have requirements from one authority source, which is NIST 8. So if you find this interesting, I will shoot over to my website. I have kind of a blog post about it. You can fill out a form to kind of be in the know, it's just a form so I know who's interested in this. But going forwards, I'll be adding in more compliance frameworks here and seeing what interesting things come about from this. I'll also be adding in policy statements so that we can map policy statements to controls, to requirements, and that lets us do some really interesting queries. And then from there, we'll be expanding into how do we actually inform the status of these controls based on our external systems. So whether that's your directory, whether that's, an endpoint tool, whether that's an HR tool, etc. Right? And so how do we really expand this? But want to give you guys kind of an interesting look of some of the cool stuff I've been building over here. So thanks.